31 and then 85 to 181 and so on. You just hand evaluate. You need to get 5 answers because it's a cubic. 2 more than the highest exponent. Now you take the difference of consecutive answers. That's where the difference comes in. 1 from 7 is 6, 7 from 31 is 24, 31 from 85, 54. So this column is created by just taking differences of the first column. Turns out that has its own equation, 6x squared. So we have the answer already for 6x squared. We just got we can take the differences of those and reset. We have an answer. And we start over again. You can hear the printer over here. You can watch it too. Okay, now we are actually doing 2 polynomials at one time. The top 4 years are keeping track. We want to keep going around. Okay, everyone, keep moving. Exceed. No. Make sure. You gotta get in there. You gotta be there. Come on, everyone. Harry, get them in front of them. They're not coming out.
Well, there's a bit of a jam over here.
I think people need to go that way. Our hairdresser is over there.
Everybody's back here. Over that way. You gotta get out.
Always
Go to the back temporarily. Go to the back temporarily.
Shift around the back side this way here. All these folks are going to be shifting that way, so see more of it. All right. Frank's here.
Everyone, please.
Five more?
That's 6,100. Get it off. The answer is 206 8259. Everyone keep moving out.
This way.
Here, I've not seen it yet. Okay, just get in the queue. Get through. By the way, what we haven't talked about is how this got constructed, how much it costs. The engine
and
this was not designed for lot number 1. No car was ever built. I don't want to see it. Right here.
All right, I'm going to probably dip to another set then. set.
Last one. Everyone get through it. Let's finish it up.
All right. Everybody back here who needs to be back here?
Anyone who hasn't seen us should be back here now, because this is the last five. The last five right now. By the way, if you've been noticing, we've been checking the answers as we've been going over and stuff.
डिपेंडिंग ऑन क्या सरफेस है वो ऊपर नीचे कर रहा है
Okay.
207-3650.
Good.
All right, that's it for the cranking. Anyone in the back should come out to the front. We're going to finish up the story here. Well, 110 years have gone by. It's 1985, the year after the Macintosh came out. And a guy named Doran Swade becomes the curator of the London Science Museum, and he asks his staff, is there anything we've got that we've never exhibited? They don't exhibit plans, they said. They're down in the basement. Well, one of the guys from his crew had been down in the basement looking over the plans, and he found Babbage's plans for difference engine number 2. And he told Doran Swade to go down and look at them because he thought there was something very interesting about them. Well, Doran figured it out for himself. Those plans were complete enough that it was probably something that Babbage could have built and that it would have actually worked. But how do they find out? Well, they've got the beautiful fragment, so they find out it's made out of cast iron, mild steel, and bronze, very common material. And Clement was achieving 1.5 thousandths of an inch tolerance when he was carving the number ones. So they go to the companies that make these things, ask them if they can carve them at that tolerance, and they said, are you kidding? We can make them fit like a glove. No, we don't want that. We want 1.5 thousandths of an inch, because that's all Babbage could achieve. So they dumbed down their machines and produced sloppy parts. They used difference engine number 2's design to build another version of the beautiful fragment. And it worked perfectly. So now the museum went through the process of getting the funding to actually build the machine, and they started working on it right away. And by, I guess, early 1991, they were almost done with the engine, building the engine, and someone pointed out that December 26th was the 200th anniversary of Charles Babbage's birth. So they hurried up and got it finished by Christmas. On the next day, on his birthday, they presented it to the London public, and they went crazy because the machine was actually working. You read the numbers off, the number was just like I've been doing. Except they ran out of money, and they couldn't build a printer. So they just kept presenting it that way for several years until through the doors comes Bill Gates. And Doran thinks to himself, Gates, money, printer, walks up to Bill. Would you be willing to fund our typesetter for the Babbage difference engine? He says, no, but I know somebody who might be. And he gives them the name of his retired chief technical officer, Nathan Mearborn. So they called Nathan on the phone. Your former boss suggested you might be willing to fund the typesetter for our Babbage difference engine. Are you interested? He says, yeah, I'm interested in that kind of stuff, but I'd have to see it. So they invited him and his wife to come over to London to see it. They're seen walking around the machine whispering to each other, and she says this to him, but they could hear her say this. Not in my house. What she was talking about was the smell of the oil that's used to lubricate the engine. Anyway, Nathan walks up the door and Swade and says, you want a new printer? Is that what you're after? He says, yeah. I'll build your printer on one condition, that you build a clone of the engine. Okay, including another printer for that, and I'll pay for all of it. But by the way, make sure you get rid of that smelly oil, which they did. This is the stuff that's used in vegetable processing plants. It has no oil. So they started on this project right away. By 2003, they had the first printer done, which was theirs. They were almost done with the engine. By the end of 2007, the second printer was ready and the engine was ready. So they called Nathan on the phone. We're ready to put this on a 747 and ship it up to the SeaTac airport. We understand you want to put this in your living room next to your Tyrannosaurus Rex. He says, that's the plan, but how much does it weigh? Well, it weighs 5 tons. My marble force can't support that. I can't take it. You can give it to the, I'll have to do something about that. You can give it to the Computer History Museum for now. I'll give it to them for a 1-year lease, no cost. So it flies into San Francisco in April of 2008. A big convoy comes down, gets put down where the cafe is now in a great big box. You take the sides off the box, inside is a bill of lading. It says contents. One difference is all the major screws had shaken loose on the machine, and it had disarrayed itself, and we couldn't crank it. So we called upon all the Queen's men to come over here and put Humpty Dumpty back together, which they did, and it got up and running by May. And we learned a lot of things about the machine and how to maintain it ourselves, and it's been running ever since, okay, until today. Today is the last day. Now, that 1-year lease turned out to be a lot longer than 1-year leases, you can see. But when we called him back at the end of the year and said we were ready to ship it to him, he said he wasn't ready. We asked him if we could keep it until 2012. He said no. We had to call him back every December. Well, by the time we got to the end of 2011, which is until 2012, we called him back and he pushed it to the next year. And it's been going on like that until this last December. We called him and he said, I want my machine. And what he's going to do with it, he's going to put in the lobby of his own company and maybe demonstrate it from there. I don't know. But it's his property, so we can't say no. And that's probably why the parking lot is all messed up. You can't park because we got to bring the crane in here to take it out of here tonight. This is in fact the last demo. Okay, now there's 2 parts of the machine I haven't covered. This is the control section. It's hardwired. If you want to know how hard, let me say this: steel plates. They're called cams. It's a cam operated machine. Actually, it's a dual cam operated machine. There are 2 cams for every function. There are 2 cam arms, one riding on each cam. It's a push fallow mechanism. One side pushes out, the other goes fallow, then the next one pushes back. So it's pushed from opposite sides. Controls all these 14 functions, which are mostly horizontal through the machine, but they do the lifting, the turning, and everything else. They even drive the printer. Okay, so it's all done off of that one mechanism. Babbage gave us the equations for those. We never had to change that. Okay, that was exactly the way it was supposed to be. The mechanism in the back, no changes. The gears in the front, no changes. In fact, there's only 13 minor modifications to the whole machine. Okay, one of which is the crank on the end over there, and the offset arms over here, and the clutch over here. Little things, nothing major. The major starting parts of this machine are just the way Babbage designed it. The typesetter, you've seen the tray moving. It's going all the way back that far. It's coming down one column. When it gets to the last row, it throws a lever that says last row. Now, at the same time, if there's a lever thrown saying last column, then we're at the end of the page. But if it's only last row, the whole machine moves the tray over one column and pulls it back out at the top. And it does that in 8 seconds. So it just prints the last answer, and then the tray starts to move. And by the time you're done with the cycle to get the next answer, it's printing it at the top of the next column. And it comes down that one, and then the next one, until there's no more columns. And when you finally get no rows, no columns, last page. And Babbage drops a wing, which pulls on this cat gut that comes over here and pulls this clutch. And that's actually how we separate the crank from the machine, so the operator can't crank it anymore. And he comes over here and takes the tray out. It's flooded with plaster of Paris. All the stuff is being printed into plaster of Paris. So you've got a mold, you're putting that up, let it dry, flood it with liquid metal like lead, let that harden, trim that out, take it out, put it directly into a printing press. It's virtually no hinge operation. Just crank and take care of that. And you can do as many plates as you want from one mold, and you can be cranking out the next mold at the same time. We have one in the case over there for you to look at. It was actually done on this machine. Okay, so that's the mechanism. Babbage had a life. In 1814, he got married to Georgiana Whitmore. In other words, he got a wife. By 1827, she was in the hospital giving birth to her 8th child. It's one child every 20 months, if you do the math. And she dies in childbirth, the child dies with her. One of his sons dies that year, his father dies that year. So 1827 was a tragic year for him. So much so that he was so dismayed, he left London, went over to mainland Europe to take a break. And while he's over there, he starts studying the Industrial Revolution. Comes back a year later, starts writing books about it. He was an inventor. Invented things you all know, like the cow catcher on the front of trains. and the ophthalmoscope to study the inside of the eye. And you got a poem from Alfred Lord Tennyson, and it had a line that went like this: "Every moment dies a man, every moment a man is born." And he had the chutzpah to write back to Tennyson and say, "Sir, if that was true, our population would be stagnant." So the next time you publish your poem, I recommend the following minor modification. Every moment dies a man, every moment 1 1/16. And then he has a footnote. 1/16 is only an approximation for the following long decimal fraction. Well, 1/16 is probably good enough for poetry. Wasn't a poet. If you look at that photograph, that's his best smile. Okay, it's Q&A time. I've given my presentation.
So this is what specifies the equation, right? The cams?
No. The difference table gives you the, this is hardwired. You cannot change the program.
So
there's no changing here.
So how do you specify the equation then?
Well, you got to figure it out.
Yeah, right. But how is that implemented in the?
Did you miss the math at the beginning?
No, but so the question is, so it's making a tables, right?
Yes.
So it's evaluating something.
Yes.
So how do you specify that equation? The equation.
The equation they have to figure out.
Yeah, right. But as it is, why not in there?
So once the, sorry, I'm gonna hop in on there.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you've built the difference table
Right.
to figure out what the machine is going to evaluate, the numbers get loaded into the engine by hand.
Okay.
Okay. It's a setup process. It takes 2 people about half an hour to do it. It's a very intricate process. We just because the engine is fragile, and we don't want to risk causing damage. And this is our cheat sheet, if you will, to set up the economy that we're going. Because it's potentially 27 digits or potentially 31 digits in each of the 8 columns.
So do you set the cogs in there?
Yes. There's a process that takes 2 people. As I said, you pretty much you're lifting things up. Right now, the wheels are locked. They don't turn.
Right. Okay.
But there are points during the cycle where the wheels can turn by hand. And the process has us stop at those particular times to set the wheels up correctly. And you lock the machine, and you're ready to go.
So the first stop is what's called something like the odd numbered columns first, and then the even numbered columns come later. When you get to that point, the gears are completely available. Okay, and you can move them and set them up by hand, and they turn either direction. So if you have to put a 9 in these, and you're on a 0, everything gets zeroed out with one complete cycle. All the odd columns count to 0, all the even columns count to 0, and these gear racks between them have been lifted up so they're not engaged. So they just don't get reset. It's a countdown to 0, but don't reset them.
So that is the human intervention, right?
Well, that's only putting in math.
Yes.
How do you, is there any error correction in there? And you can
No.
check?
Roughly speaking, the error correction comes as part of that half-hour process of verifying that you put in the number that A, you expected to put in, and B, you got off of the difference table. Now that in and of itself, yes, Babbage probably disliked the notion that there were human beings mucking with his precious machinery. I had heard that one of the reasons why he went on to do the analytical engine was so that the machine could set up the difference engine and a human being wouldn't have to. Because the analytical engine did in fact contain at least one and possibly several difference engines.
And it was controlled by punch cards.
Is there another question? Ma'am?
So what's the current X that you're cranking out?
6120, I think. I mean, technically speaking, it is 1.6120. Did you tell them about what we're doing?
Yeah, that we're doing a polynomial, this polynomial.
And that it's the polynomial itself is base 10 logarithms.
Right.
I don't remember if you said that.
Yeah, that was where we are.
Okay.
This young lady's got her hand up in the air and has it for a while. What would you like to ask?
When you look at the paper, you can't see anything.
Yes, okay, that's a good point. You would look at the paper, there's nothing on it. The tray doesn't have any plaster of Paris in it. And that's because it takes 3 hours to clean up the mess. So we don't have the inking roller in place, and we don't have any plaster of Paris in the tray, so that all we have to do is pull the tray back on and start all over again. Because we're not really trying to produce a result, but you understand the process.
We did in fact,
Monday night,
just a week ago,
This last Monday night.
We had our own thing where they did in fact put ink on the roller for the first time. How long did it take to clean up? 2.5 hours to clean the ink off that roller. So that would explain why we don't do it on a regular basis.
There was a high-pitched sound that occurred while
Yes.
we were cranking. What is producing that sound?
That's only since last January. That's the 13th modification. We put a strap around one of those shafts in the back because that shaft momentum was causing it to go too far. It's right over here to where this gear is. And when the gears came around, they used to hit the teeth like this. They wouldn't mesh because the thing had drifted too far and left itself in the wrong place. Basically what that does is it slows it down, it basically stops it right away, so that the gears are ready to go like this, and to mesh together like they're supposed to.
So it's a leather strap wrapped around this shaft. That's what's caused that high-pitched whine that you hear. It's actually a repurposed dog leash.
Yes, so it's the analytical engine that had design followed this that Ada Lovelace worked on, and that was programmable.
She had nothing to do with this.
Yes.
The only thing she had to do with this is she saw the beautiful fragment in operation at one of his soirees, and it got her charged up. But gee, I like to get involved with this kind of math. But since he never got beyond the beautiful fragment, that wasn't her thing. Her thing was the analytical engine.
What percentage of the analytical engine design was
The typesetter that you see on the end of this machine, I'm told, was originally designed to work with the analytical engine. So, percentage-wise, that's not much.
Okay, the young lady here wants to ask a question.
So this is a stored energy machine with motion and a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Yes, it certainly is.
Yes. It doesn't store that much energy, though. I'm the one storing the energy. There are some springs in the machine, and those are energy storage bits.
That brings up one point.
I do the motion.
Babbage hated springs. He would not allow, for example, springs under tension. Okay, but springs under compression were okay. So that's but over here. This mechanism is all gravity. This is what pulls after the number wheels and the numbers are gone. That pulls the number wheels back, and we call these our chimes.
And that's another bit of energy storage, actually, there.
Did you ever think of using steam power?
No, he knew he didn't want to use steam power, even though he made that remark, because a steam engine would not be able to handle the varying load that was on the machine, because it does vary all over. It's like being on a roller coaster, from being really easy to really hard. And if it jams instantly, and they didn't have the decoupling mechanisms back in those days to disengage the engine, it would have chewed the machine to death.
Babbage's plan is show a hand.
Yeah, definitely. But he never knew that it was going to have that much weight.
And talking about the energy required to drive it, how much torque does it take to drive it?
I don't know about the torque.
I'm a poor judge. In terms of applied force, the figure that we've been given is with the 4-to-1 reduction that the Science Museum put on, it's about 35 pounds of pressure at its peak. That's about a 12-inch arm. So I'll let you do the math on it.
Some of the modifications that were built were because Babbage never built it and didn't know what would happen when you cranked it. When it was put together in London and they first cranked it, they hit 130 pounds worth of force on that main crank. And they said, we can't do this. This is like lifting a 130-pound person into the air and putting them down every 8 seconds. So they put a committee together called What Would Babbage Do? and the answer was because he had taken his 24,000 part machine down to 8, he could do a lot of things. But he would have put a 4-to-1 reduction, just as Eric said. Yes?
After it's gone, what's going to be put up here?
An excellent question.
I don't know.
We don't. There's various talk and speculation. It's been suggested that maybe we should build our own, and that we raise funds for it. It's been suggested that we try and make an analytical engine.
Except the plans for that are very incomplete. To give you an example of how incomplete. We started that after he finished this in the early 1830s, and he died in 1872. And the interesting thing is that he kept changing his plans. And there's an organization out there called plan28.org that's got the best of the plans that they're trying to build from, but it's only half complete. They're like that diagram over there. Some of the gears, don't even have teeth on them in his plans. He never got those things finished. So they're actually doing a lot of guesswork, which means it won't be original Babbage. This is 99.9%. I mean, it was only 13 modifications. It's really close.
So we will decide whether to build another one for the viewers.
It's
The
going to
trustees,
cost.
the board. Can we do something?
I'll give you a dollar.
You can play.
I mean,
I don't know the answer to that question. The concept of building another difference engine was floated 6 days ago. So this is extremely early days. I guess I would say keep an eye out. And
there's an alternative plan, I would suggest. I just thought of this. There's a difference engine in London, and it's not being used. It's in mothballs because all the people who were involved in designing it have retired. They don't dare crank it. But if they brought it over here, we would be able to run it here and maintain it here. So all we have to do is pay for the shipping.
get into agreement.
And this is not a mechanism that is amenable to a commando liberation.
Yes, ma'am.
Have there been any other equations in here, and how did you
Oh,
choose
yes.
this one?
Oh, yes. We had a very simple seventh order polynomial in here when we first started. And it meant nothing to anybody other than the fact that the machine was cranking out values. Okay? And then we said, why don't we do something, why don't we put the thing in here that Babbage himself wanted to do, which was, polynomials that do...
Base 10 logarithms are an extremely useful thing to have. It's a very nice polynomial expression for purposes of demonstration, the difference in the difference table. And negative numbers means lots of carries, which means it looks really cool. But in theory, any 27, we do like to keep the top 4 to keep track of the value of x. So any polynomial in 27 digits would be, something that we could that we could do.
Or we could do, 2 smaller equations.
You could do a 13 and 14 digit as well. Any you turn off carry levers in the back, and that sort of splits the machine into 2 parts.
The carry lever has been disengaged, so it can't be triggered. And when it gets to carry into that, it doesn't operate. So you basically have a top level for the carry. Can't go beyond it.
Other questions, sir?
Why is it hard to build?
Why is it hard to build? An interesting question. It was hard for the Science Museum to build because their goal was to demonstrate that Babbage could have built it. And that meant that they had to figure out what sort of materials he had available. They had to limit themselves to the precision that Clement was capable of doing, which actually meant hand finishing all of the gears. In theory, one could properly measure the gears, throw them at a computer-controlled milling machine, and just start spitting out parts, which might be faster, might be cheaper. No one's done it.
No. And even Monday night, I was talking to one of the head people here who said, I've already got the first check to possibly build it, but we don't have to do what they did to prove that it works because it's been proven that Babbage's design works. All we have to do is get something we can demonstrate.
Could it be 3D printed?
Yeah. I doubt it.
I'm not sure where the technology is there. This sort of thing is, I think, more amenable to subtractive than additive manufacture, just because it's gears that gotta work and keep working.
The number of cranking is the number of columns.
No. Because of the way the engine works, it goes odd columns, even columns, odd columns, even columns. The number of turns of the crank is a function of where they set it so that people like me could crank the engine. It's one revolution of the main shaft can do a first order polynomial all the way up to a 7th order polynomial. That does not matter.
This gives answers for 5 digits, right? One for all.
Excuse me?
How long does it give answers? Like it's a 5-digit answers?
No. It's 30. Each number stack is 31 digits high. We read off only 7 because logarithms. Yeah, we're doing the polynomial doesn't precisely match the log curve. And it can't. Those of you who know it will understand. And so we limit ourselves to something that can do 7 places.
Oh, when we put the equation in, we know what it's got. The equation comes first. The equation, you find in a book, the equation for doing sine curve. Put the equation in, it does the sine curve. So we know what it's doing. But it's all mathematical table that it's trying to produce.
It would be hard to go backward.
Yeah, there's no going back. You gotta go forward. Sir.
Are you sending like an instruction or maintenance manual with it?
In general, yes, actually. Our lead volunteer, in fact, has been here today sort of typing up some last-minute bits to pass along to the folks at Dr. Mirabald's company so that they will learn from the benefit of our experience.
They could possibly actually present that they hired their own operators.
I think we are going to have to close this down. I have a 2 p.m. docent tour. There is another demonstration scheduled for 3 p.m.
And I have to go eat lunch.
There will probably be about as many people for that as for this one. So, thank you very much for your time and attention. I got the values here. I need to check it.
Okay. I'll do the groups of 3. You want to go bottom up or top down?
Top down.
207.
Yeah.
335.
Yes.
087.
Yes.
458.
Yes.
997.
Yes.
745.
Yes.
373.
Yes. Yes.
691.
Yes. Okay, we're good.
Hi, excuse me.
The cost question. There was an insurance policy in the box. $3 million is what it cost this part. We built another one of these. This is $2 million of the work. That's $1 million.
For just really?
Oh, look at all the small minor.
Oh wow!
That's incredible. This is 4,000 parts crammed in this little space. This is 4,000 parts,
Right? Yeah. That's incredible.
So yeah, that's twice as expensive to build.
We're starting the presentation.
Oh yes, I am going to. Yeah. Am I going to miss this? Absolutely. I've been doing this since 2008.